So there's a long history of audit standards, our world. I was with a large CPA firm for almost 2 decades. We were trying to figure out how can we move from pen and ink signatures to accepting engagement letters and other things using digital signatures, confirmation digital signatures. And we would go to the AICPA, we'd go to the IAASB, and they say, this isn't our role. It's up to the governments, it's up to regulations, it's up to technology people to come up with the rules of digital signatures. And then, as Jason said, we'll just sort of apply that. We're not going to tell you you can't use digital signatures. Where it's legal, you obviously can. Which means it comes back, where does the audit profession, whether that is the regulator, whether that's the AICPA and related groups around the world, do they have the characteristics necessary to influence technology's direction in making blockchain ready for audit? You've heard me say my current chaotic quest is how to make blockchain ready for audit and how to make auditors ready for blockchain. So where should that influence come from? How can we work here? How can we hit the next arrow and not the blank arrow? So 3 years ago, a group under the Blockchain and Distributed Ledger Group ISO TC 307 was born. That group had 2 remits. One is to add a work item to come up with a paper called Guidance for Auditing DLT Systems, providing guidance on the various domains, financial reporting being one, but blockchain having many other potential impacts, which areas under it should be considered when you perform an audit procedure related to DLT. And again, my goal, I was not the original leader, but I was part of it from its beginning. And I wanted to influence that we would not be competing with other ISO 307 groups and more broadly, other ISO groups. ISO TC 68 is the financial services group, and they're developing standards for banks and insurance and other things where obviously fintech is big, blockchain is playing there. What is the role of 307? What's the role of TC 68? Our Luca presenters talked about how do we have a great way to identify digital tokens. And there's a standard, and the number just went out. It's like 24.165.2021 is a digital token identifier standard from ISO TC 68 SC8 reference data for financial institutions work group 3. And they're about to update that. So it's all dispersed throughout ISO, but how do we not compete with 307? How do we not compete with other ISO groups? How do we not compete with the role of an audit regulator, the FRC, PCOB, and others, and standard setters? How do we embrace and bring together and not compete with the profession? And I keep hitting that wrong button. So here is a picture in my mind, roughly drawn, of the audit information supply chain related to blockchain. And we've got enterprises there in the middle. They're the ones that we're concerned with. We've got auditors who are going to be involved in some way. We've got audit regulators and standard setters. We've got someone who's going to come up with principles and criteria for the audit. We've got developers. We've got of wallets and keys and the distributed ledgers. We've got custodians and exchanges, and we've got some other folks who I'm obviously missing. But then we have someone who's going to want to have some audit comfort out of this. And so over 3 years, we tried to get direct participation input. And Jason was very kind to help me to speak to the FRC, and I've spoken to the CPAB, and I've spoken to the PCOB, and I've spoken to the AICPA, and I've spoken to many different folks from the regulatory side of what they need. I've spoken to most of the big N firms. I've tried to talk to FEI, I've tried to talk to SOC, I've tried to talk to IIA. So we've gotten as much feedback to figure out what's needed, how we make blockchains auditable. Can we use ISO TC 295's ISO 21378:2019 audit data standards, or XBRL GL? There's another tick on that Eric card. How can we use blockchain? How can we encourage it in areas where we can strengthen the audit trail? And again, there's already some great standards that are broad and generic, like ISO 22739 vocabulary. Jen mentioned the glossary. We've got so much difference even between what the IRS and the PCOB and the SEC and the ICPA and the OECD, and everyone says, what do we call our world? We've got some standards here. The reference architecture, how can we have an audit-specific reference architecture to make it easier to look at different things here? And again, I know that I'm running out of time and I'm running between you and lunch. We've had some challenges over the last 3 years, primarily because of the broad participation of the audit information supply chain wasn't there. And again, that's why I would love to loop you guys into the process. My goal is to try and have an international event or two where we bring together the audit information supply chain in blockchain space to be informed, to be educated, to understand what's going on, to have methods to play with it. Because if we just go to the ISO itself, the term audit is defined in dozens of different documents for dozens of different reasons. And again, we've got this, is blockchain ready to be audited? Are enterprises ready to be audited? We know they're out there, but you can't have best practices until you have some practices, but we don't want practices unless we know what we're doing. Horse meet cart, cart meet horse. So we're working on the next steps. I was hoping to have a better answer for you. I was on the call last night. My session is now Monday instead of today. I will let you know what happens, but we were looking, can we do surveys of existing practices to find the gaps? Can we build a technical architecture for auditable blockchain ecosystems? Can we have an event to bring together people to talk?